Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring something that's more critical than you might think, backing up your NAS storage. Now, you probably have some idea of why backups are important, but get this, ransomware attacks, specifically targeting NAS devices, have skyrocketed by over 400% in the last year alone.
Wow.
And those RAID configurations many people rely on, well, they're not the impenetrable fortress you might believe. So today we're going to unpack all of that, the real risks, the surprisingly vulnerable points, and most importantly, the strategies you can use to protect your precious data from everything. From those sneaky cyber attacks and hardware meltdowns to, let's face it, those oops moments we all have.
Mm.
Joining me today is someone who knows this world inside and out, with a deep understanding of data security and backup strategies.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the threat landscape has changed so rapidly. Just a few years ago, ransomware was a nuisance. But now it's a major threat to businesses and individuals alike. And NAS devices, with their concentration of valuable data, are prime targets. In fact, 1 in 5 businesses now report being victims of a ransomware attack.
Wow, 1 in 5. That's a sobering statistic.
Mhm.
So let's break this down a bit. Why are NAS devices so attractive to these cyber criminals?
It really comes down to the nature of the data. Think about what you store on your NAS. Photos, videos, financial documents, important work files. For businesses, it often holds critical operational data, or even customer information. This makes NAS devices a goldmine for attackers looking for a big payday.
Okay, so it's like they're robbing a digital bank, and
Yeah,
our NAS devices are the vault.
exactly.
And I'm guessing that basic RAID setup many people have isn't going to cut it in this new landscape.
You're absolutely right. RAID, which stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks, is great for what we call hardware failures. If one of your hard drives kicks the bucket, RAID can keep your system running and your data accessible. But RAID isn't designed to protect against sophisticated cyber attacks like ransomware.
So RAID is like having a spare tire. Good for common problems, but not for major accident.
That's a great analogy. RAID is definitely important for basic data resilience. But it's not enough in today's threat environment. What you need is something that can withstand a targeted attack that aims to lock down your entire system.
All right, so if RAID alone isn't enough, what's the solution? How do we protect ourselves from these digital bank robbers?
This is where the concept of air gapping becomes absolutely crucial. It's like having an escape route for your data, a way to get it out of harm's way. Even if your primary NAS gets compromised, imagine having a backup of your data that's completely offline, stored on a device that's not connected to any network. That's what air gapping is all about, creating a physical barrier to protect your data from cyber attacks.
Okay, I'm starting to see why air gapping is so important. But how do you actually implement it? Is it something everyone can do, or is it just for big companies with IT departments?
That's one of the great things about the advances in data security technology. Air gapping is no longer just for the enterprise level. Companies like StoneFly have developed solutions that make it accessible for businesses of all sizes, and even for individuals who want to seriously protect their personal data.
StoneFly. I've heard that name before. What makes their air gapping solutions stand out?
StoneFly has been a pioneer in the data storage and backup world for over 2 decades. They've been at the forefront of developing and refining these crucial security features. One of the things that sets StoneFly apart is their focus on automated, policy-driven air gapping. Their solutions are designed to seamlessly integrate with your existing systems and take the guesswork out of data protection.
Automated, policy-driven air gapping. Those sound like pretty technical terms. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Sure. Let's say you're setting up your backup system. With StoneFly's solutions, you can define specific policies that dictate how your data is backed up and protected. For example, you could set a policy to automatically create an air-gapped backup every night at a certain time. This backup would be stored on a completely separate system, physically disconnected from your network. So even if a hacker manages to get into your primary NAS, they can't touch the air-gapped backup.
So it's like having a digital fortress, a vault that's inaccessible from the outside world.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so effective against ransomware. Even if your primary NAS device is compromised, the air-gapped backup remains untouched, untainted, and ready to be restored. It's like having an insurance policy for your data in the event of a digital catastrophe.
That sounds incredibly secure, but I imagine it must be quite expensive to set up and maintain. A separate physical vault for backups.
It can be, especially for smaller businesses or individuals. That's why StoneFly also offers cloud-based air-gapping solutions.
Ooh, cloud-based air gapping. That sounds intriguing. How does that work?
It's similar to a physical air-gapped vault, but instead of having a separate server on your premises, your backups are stored in a secure cloud environment. that's logically isolated from your network. Think of it as a virtual data vault, a fortress in the cloud. And StoneFly's cloud-based air-gapping solutions are designed with the same level of security and resilience as their physical counterparts. They use multiple layers of encryption access controls and monitoring to ensure that your data is protected at all times.
It's like having a private, secure bunker in a remote location, but without the physical overhead.
Exactly. And because it's in the cloud, it's more scalable and cost-effective than a physical air-gapped vault. You can easily scale your storage capacity as needed, and you don't have to worry about the costs of maintaining and managing a separate physical server. Plus, StoneFly really takes the complexity out of cloud backups. You don't need to be a tech expert to set it up and manage it effectively.
All right, so we've covered ransomware and the limitations of RAID. We've talked about the importance of air-gapped backups, especially with solutions like the one StoneFly offers. But I have a feeling there's more to this data protection puzzle, right? I mean, even if we have the best backups in the world, what happens when the hardware itself starts acting up?
You are absolutely right. Ransomware is a huge threat. But we can't forget about all the other ways our data can be at risk. What happens when the hardware itself starts acting up? Those hard drives that store all our precious data, well, they have a lifespan, just like anything else. They wear out over time. And then there's the risk of power surges, electrical issues. Those can cause widespread damage in an instant.
So even if we're super careful and avoid those oops moments, our hardware can still betray us.
That's the thing about technology. It's not always predictable. And even RAID, which is supposed to protect against hard drive failures, has its weaknesses.
Come on, RAID, you had one job. What do you mean?
Well, imagine this. One of your hard drives in your RAID array fails. You replace it. And the RAID starts rebuilding itself, copying data from the other drives to the new one. But what happens if another drive fails during that rebuild process?
I have a bad feeling about this.
You got it. It's like a domino effect. One failure can lead to another, and suddenly your entire RAID array is toast. You're looking at potential total data loss. That's why even with RAID, regular backups are still crucial. They're like an insurance policy for your data, making sure you can recover even if things go terribly wrong with your hardware.
Okay, so we've covered ransomware, hardware failures, and the importance of backups. But I can't help but think there's another piece to this puzzle, something a little closer to home.
You're right, there is. And it's something we often overlook. We've talked about external threats and unpredictable hardware. But what about the human element?
Ooh, you're talking about human error, the silent data killer. Let's dive into that. What are some of the common mistakes we make that can lead to data loss?
It's those everyday slip-ups that can catch us off guard. Accidentally deleting a file, overwriting something important, misplacing a folder. These seemingly small errors can have huge consequences.
We've all been there. That hard-stopping moment when you realize you've deleted the wrong file. It's like a mini data disaster.
Exactly. And it happens more often than you think. We're all human. We all make mistakes. But the key is to have safeguards in place to protect ourselves from those mistakes.
Which brings us back to backups, right?
You got it. Regular backups act as a safety net, a way to rewind those oops moments and minimize the impact of our human fallibility. It's like having a data time machine. You can go back and retrieve that file you accidentally deleted, or restore that folder you accidentally moved. And again, this is where solutions like those from StoneFly can really shine. They offer features like versioning, which allows you to go back and recover previous versions of files, even if they've been overwritten or deleted.
So even if I'm the one who messes up, backups can save the day.
Absolutely. Backups are like a forgiveness button for our data mistakes.
Yeah.
They give us that second chance to recover and get things back on track.
This is making me realize just how vulnerable our data really is. We've got ransomware lurking out there, hardware that can fail without warning, and our own human tendencies to make mistakes. It's a lot to think about.
It's true, there are a lot of potential pitfalls. But the good news is that we have the tools and strategies to protect ourselves. And that's why we're doing this deep dive, to equip you with the knowledge and awareness to keep your data safe. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of NAS storage backup.
It's great to be back. We've covered a lot of ground already in the first part. We talked about the alarming rise in ransomware attacks, the vulnerabilities of RAID systems, and the crucial role of air-gapped backups in protecting our data.
We also discussed how companies like StoneFly are making these advanced security features accessible to a wider range of users, from large enterprises to small businesses and even individuals.
It was really eye-opening to learn how they're making air-gapping both more sophisticated and more user-friendly with their automated policy-driven solutions. Now, I'm curious to dive a little deeper into the specifics of how these solutions work. Can you give us a real-world example of how someone might implement a StoneFly air gapping solution?
Absolutely. Let's say you're a small business owner and you have a NAS device that stores all your important customer data, financial records, and operational files. You know you need a robust backup strategy, especially with the rising threat of ransomware
It
attacks.
sounds like a very common scenario for many businesses these days, so where do you start?
Well, one option would be to use StoneFly's physical air-gapped vault solution. It's essentially a separate dedicated backup server that's physically disconnected from your network. It's like having a secure vault where your backup data is stored offline. So even if your primary NAS device is compromised, the air-gapped backup remains untouched and ready to be restored.
That sounds like a very secure approach, but I can see how having a separate physical server could be a challenge for some businesses, especially those with limited space or resources.
You're absolutely right. That's why StoneFly also offers cloud-based air-gapping solutions, which are becoming increasingly popular. With these solutions, your backups are stored in a secure cloud environment managed by StoneFly, but they are logically isolated from your network. This means they're just as inaccessible to hackers as a physical air-gapped vault, but you don't have to worry about managing the physical hardware yourself.
So it's like having a virtual vault in the cloud, protected by all those same layers of security.
Exactly. And StoneFly offers different cloud-based air-gapping options to suit different needs and budgets. For example, their air-gapped cloud solution provides a dedicated, isolated cloud environment, specifically for your backups. It's like having your own private cloud fortress.
And what about those businesses that already use cloud storage for other purposes? Do they have to manage separate systems for their air-gapped backups?
That's a great question. One of the things that makes StoneFly's solutions so versatile is that they can integrate seamlessly with your existing cloud infrastructure. They offer a solution called always-on-air gapped backups, which can work with your existing cloud storage provider to create those isolated air-gapped backups without requiring you to set up a whole new system.
That sounds incredibly convenient. So
Yeah.
businesses can essentially add that extra layer of air-gapped security to their existing cloud backups.
Precisely, and that's one of the key advantages of working with a company like StoneFly. They've really thought through the challenges of implementing air gapping in different environments and have developed solutions that are both highly secure and very user-friendly.
So far, we've focused heavily on air gapping as a defense against ransomware. But let's not forget about all those other data loss scenarios. We talked about earlier, hardware failures, human error, those oh-no moments that are completely out of our control like natural disasters. How does a comprehensive backup strategy address all of these potential risks?
You're right, it's crucial to have a multi-layered approach to data protection. Think of it like building a castle. You have your outer walls, your moats, your guard towers, each layer working together to create a formidable defense. Air-gapped backups are a critical part of that defense, but they are not the only layer.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Hmm.
So if air-gapped backups are our outer wall, what are some of the other layers we need to consider?
Well, we've already touched on cloud backups, which are essential for offsite redundancy and disaster recovery. Having that separate copy of your data stored in a geographically diverse location, ideally managed by experts like StoneFly, can be a lifesaver if your primary site is affected by a natural disaster or some other major disruption.
Right, it's like having a backup data center in a completely different part of the world. So even if something catastrophic happens to your primary location, you still have access to your data.
Exactly. And that brings us to another crucial element, local backups. Think of this as your first line of defense, your quick recovery option for more common issues, like a hard drive failure or accidental file deletion.
So the local backup is like having a spare tire in your car. You might not need it often, but it's essential to have it on hand in case of an emergency.
That's a perfect way to put it. It allows you to quickly restore data without having to wait. For a larger recovery process from the cloud or an air-gapped vault, you can store your local backups on a separate NAS device, an external hard drive, or even a dedicated backup server depending on your needs and budget.
This is starting to sound like a lot to manage. Are there any tools or strategies that can help streamline the process of creating and managing all these different backups?
Absolutely. This is another area where a company like StoneFly can really simplify things. Their solutions offer features like automation and scheduling, so you can set your backups to run automatically at specific times without having to remember to do it manually. They also offer incremental and differential backups.
Now, I remember we touched on those terms earlier. Can you remind us what those are and how they help?
Of course, think of a full backup as taking a snapshot of your entire data set. At a specific point in time, it's comprehensive. But it can also be very resource intensive. Incremental backups only capture the data that has changed since the last backup. Whether it's a full backup or another incremental one, this saves a ton of time and storage space because you're not backing up the same data over and over again.
So it's like taking a series of smaller focused photos of just the changes that have been made, rather than taking a giant photo of everything every time.
Exactly. And differential backups are similar, but they capture all the changes since the last full backup. So it's a bit more comprehensive than incremental, but still more efficient than a full backup every time. StoneFly solutions allow you to choose the backup method that best suits your needs and resources.
Okay, so we've got air-gapped backups for that impenetrable security against cyber threats, cloud backups for off-site redundancy and disaster recovery local backups, for quick recovery from minor disruptions and tools like automation incremental backups, and differential backups to help streamline the entire process. It's starting to feel like we're building a pretty formidable data fortress.
We're definitely getting there. But there's one more crucial layer we need to add: disaster recovery planning.
Ah, yes, the data fire drill we talked about earlier. The plan for what to do when something really bad happens.
Exactly. A disaster recovery plan outlines the steps you need to take to recover your data and systems. In case of a major disruption, whether it's a natural disaster, a cyber attack, or even a significant hardware failure, it's like having a blueprint for getting back on your feet after a data earthquake.
So it's not just about having backups, it's about having a clear plan for how to use them when disaster strikes.
Precisely, a good disaster recovery plan should include things like identifying your critical data and systems, establishing recovery time objectives, which is how quickly you need to be back up and running, defining roles and responsibilities for recovery tasks, establishing communication protocols, documenting step-by-step procedures for data and system restoration, and very importantly, regularly testing and updating your plan.
Wow, that's a pretty comprehensive list. Sounds like a lot of work to put together.
Yeah.
A disaster recovery plan, where do you even begin?
It can be a daunting task, especially if you're not familiar with the process. But there are resources available to help, and this is another area where a company like StoneFly can be a valuable partner. They offer consulting services, disaster recovery assessments, and even fully managed disaster recovery solutions.
So they can help you not only build the data fortress, but also create the escape route in case the fortress is breached.
Exactly. They're a true partner in data protection, providing the expertise and support you need to navigate the complexities of the modern data landscape.
This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. I'm starting to see data protection in a whole new light.
It's not just about backing up your data. It's about having a comprehensive strategy that addresses all the potential risks and having the right partners and solutions in place to implement that strategy effectively.
It's about building layers of protection, having a plan for disaster recovery, and partnering with experts like StoneFly who can guide you through the process.
And it's about recognizing that data protection is an ongoing journey, not a one-time event. We need to stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay ahead of the curve as the threat landscape continues to evolve.
Well said. There's no such thing as being too careful when it comes to protecting your valuable data. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into NAS storage backup. I have to say I'm feeling a lot more informed, but also a bit overwhelmed by everything we've covered so far.
It's definitely a lot to take in, but that's why we're doing this deep dive. We want to make sure you have a solid understanding of the complexities of data protection in today's world.
You're right. In the first two parts, we really dissected the threats, the vulnerabilities, and the many layers of a comprehensive backup strategy. We talked about air-gapping cloud backups, local backups, disaster recovery planning. It's quite a checklist.
It is, and I think one of the key takeaways is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. The right approach will depend on your specific needs, your resources, and the level of risk you're comfortable with.
Absolutely. And another important point is that you don't have to go it alone. We talked about how companies like StoneFly can be a valuable partner. In navigating these complexities, they had the expertise, the experience, and the solutions to help you build a truly resilient data protection strategy.
Couldn't agree more. They've been at the forefront of this field for over 2 decades, constantly innovating and developing new ways to safeguard data. In fact, I think it would be really helpful to take a look at some real-world examples of how StoneFly solutions are being used by businesses to address those very data challenges we've been discussing.
I love that idea. Real-world examples always make things more concrete and relatable. Do you have any specific case studies in mind?
I do. One that comes to mind is a healthcare organization that was under increasing pressure. To protect sensitive patient data, as you know, healthcare data is incredibly valuable. both to the patients themselves and to the organizations that handle it. It's subject to strict regulations, and any breach or loss of data can have severe consequences.
Absolutely, and we hear about these healthcare data breaches all the time in the news. It's a very real threat.
Yeah.
So how did this organization approach the challenge of protecting their NAS storage?
Well, they recognized that their existing backup strategy, which relied mainly on RAID and local backups, was no longer sufficient in the face of today's sophisticated cyber threats. They knew they needed to step up their game.
That sounds like a smart move.
Right.
RAID and local backups alone can be vulnerable to ransomware and other targeted attacks, as we discussed in the first part of our deep dive. So what did they do to strengthen their defenses?
They decided to implement a multi-layered strategy that included air-gapped backups, cloud backups, and a comprehensive disaster recovery plan. They essentially adopted that data fortress approach we were talking about earlier.
A classic data protection trifecta. And I'm guessing they turned to StoneFly to help them build this fortress.
They did. They knew that StoneFly had the expertise and the proven solutions to create a truly robust data protection plan for their sensitive patient data. They worked closely with StoneFly's team to design and implement a solution that met their specific needs and budget.
So what did that solution look like in practice?
They deployed a combination of StoneFly's physical and cloud-based air-gapping solutions. The physical air-gapped vault solution provided a secure, on-premises backup repository that was completely disconnected from their network. This ensured that even if ransomware managed to infiltrate their primary NAS device, those critical backups would remain safe and sound.
So they had that ultimate offline protection, that digital fortress we were talking about. But they didn't stop there, right? They also incorporated cloud backups.
Exactly. They understood that having off-site redundancy was crucial for disaster recovery. They chose to leverage StoneFly's cloud-based air-gapping solutions to ensure that their data was protected even in the event of a major disruption to their primary location.
That makes perfect sense. So they had their data backed up in two separate locations, both physically and logically isolated from each other. That's a pretty impressive level of protection, but it sounds like they went even further and implemented a comprehensive disaster recovery plan.
You're absolutely right. They knew that having backups was only part of the solution. They also needed a clear plan for how to actually recover that data and get their systems back up and running if a disaster were to strike. StoneFly helped them develop and implement a disaster recovery plan. That covered everything from identifying critical data and systems to establishing recovery time objectives and defining roles and responsibilities for recovery tasks.
Wow, they really thought of everything. It sounds like they were truly prepared for any eventuality, whether it was a ransomware attack, a hardware failure, or even a natural disaster.
They were, and the peace of mind that came with knowing their data was truly protected was invaluable. They were able to focus on their core mission of providing excellent patient care, knowing that their data was in safe hands.
That's a fantastic example. It really highlights the importance of a multi-layered approach to data protection and the value of partnering with experts like StoneFly. Do you have any other case studies you'd like to share?
Yes, I do. Another great example is a financial services company that was dealing with rapid data growth. As you might imagine, financial data is incredibly sensitive and valuable. So security is paramount in this industry.
Absolutely. And with all the digital transactions and online activity these days, I can only imagine how much data a financial services company must generate. So what kind of challenges were they facing?
They were experiencing what we often call the data storage squeeze. Their existing infrastructure was struggling to keep up with their backup needs. As their data volumes continued to grow, they knew they needed a more scalable and efficient solution, but they didn't want to compromise on security.
That's a tough spot to be in. It sounds like they needed a solution that could offer both scalability and rock-solid security. How did StoneFly help them address these challenges?
StoneFly worked with them to implement a cloud-based backup solution. That leveraged StoneFly's always on-air gapped backups technology. This solution provided continuous data protection without disrupting their workflows and offered the scalability they needed to accommodate their rapidly growing data volumes.
So they were able to take advantage of the flexibility and cost-effectiveness of cloud storage, while still maintaining that critical air-gapped protection against cyber threats.
Precisely. And because StoneFly's solution integrated seamlessly with their existing cloud infrastructure, they didn't have to rip and replace their entire system. It was a very smooth and efficient transition.
These case studies are really inspiring. They show that implementing a robust NAS storage backup strategy is not just a theoretical exercise. It's a practical necessity for businesses of all sizes and industries.
I agree. They highlight the very real threats that businesses face today and demonstrate how a well-designed backup strategy, often with the help of experts like StoneFly, can mitigate those risks and provide that essential peace of mind.
It's clear that in today's data-driven world, protecting your data is not just a nice-to-have, it's a must-have.
Couldn't agree more. We generate more data than ever before, and that data is becoming increasingly valuable and vulnerable. It's no longer a question of if a data loss event will occur, but when.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to be prepared, to have the right strategies and solutions in place, to ensure that you can recover quickly and effectively if the worst were to happen.
Absolutely. And as we've seen throughout our deep dive, StoneFly has emerged as a clear leader. In the data protection space, their solutions are trusted by businesses around the world to safeguard their most valuable asset, their data.
If you're listening to this and thinking, okay, I need to take my data protection more seriously, where do you even begin?
A great first step is to visit StoneFly's website at www.stonefly.com. They have a wealth of information about their solutions, including detailed product descriptions, case studies, white papers, and even a blog where they discuss the latest trends and best practices in data protection.
And if you're ready to have a conversation with an expert, you can reach out to their sales team directly at sales@stonefly.com. They're incredibly knowledgeable and passionate about helping businesses protect their data.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm.
Remember, data protection is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing journey. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay ahead of the curve. That's the message we want to leave you with today.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the world of NAS storage backup. We hope you found it informative, insightful, and maybe even a little bit empowering.
Until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and keep those backups running.